Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sikich Live, episode 21. Today, we are going to be talking about ERP change management and everything that entails. We have a great guest for you all today. It is a partner within the Sikich technology practice, Robert Sawyer. But before we get to bringing him on, just wanted to say, be sure you like, be sure you subscribe, and leave a comment as we have this kind of live stream session right now. You are able to ask our guest questions, and we could then put them on the show for them to be answered. And now, I guess without further ado, we will bring Robert on. Robert, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Sikich Live.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
And you're a returning guest on Sikich Live, as well as just virtual events in general. You were on the ERP bootcamp a while ago for those that tuned in for that. But for those who are just meeting you today, how about you give us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so as far as being a partner in the technology practice, we mostly focus on enterprise clients, meaning of a certain size. Depending on revenue, it could be anywhere from 100 million to roughly about 2 or 3 billion. But prior to that, I did work with more small and medium-sized businesses implementing Dynamics GP. Right now, currently within my practice, we focus on Dynamics 365, finance and operations. We also have a Microsoft CRM referred to as CE now as part of that component, a customized development team. And the biggest thing that we try to do is curate a complete enterprise solution and user experience for our project implementation, rather than solely focused on ERP or segmenting things out like sometimes some of the other people that we compete with.
Oh, great. And so I think that kind of leads into our discussion about change management for sure today. And we'll jump into the questions here. So, I mean, of course, the thing on top of everybody's mind right now is the pandemic and everything happening organizationally, societally, and things like that. However, businesses trying to take care of a lot of brand new challenges. Is it okay? Is it an okay time to be adding an ERP project on top of all that?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is we're seeing explosive demand in certain industries. Unfortunately for hospitality, some restaurant, some restaurant industries, travel and so forth, oil and gas, not as much, but consumer packaged goods, industrial equipment manufacturing, distribution, they're being put to the test as far as ability to respond to demand and increased demand and unforecasted demand. So what probably isn't the best time for them is trying to scramble to add on capacity and implement brand new systems. But at the same time, they still see the value, because what we're receiving feedback right now is that they're anticipating increased safety stock, additional people stocking up on supplies, and they're ramping up for that. And that's causing manufacturers to run additional schedules. They're seeing their orders increase. Sometimes they're getting more shelf space because other competitors are not able to resupply as fast. And so what they realize is it's not necessarily you can only add so many people to a warehouse space. You can increase your capacity through your e-commerce visibility, digitization, and I would say a technology transformation type of initiative. So the long-winded answer is I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect time, but I think what we can do, and we don't have a one-size-fit-all approach, is we can scale things. There's a lot of pre-planning exercise, if you will, that's valuable to the project of getting your executive team together, understanding how to communicate the message effectively, how to load balance, if you will, demand with the different work streams that we go through in our business process alignment discussions. So there's a lot of things that doesn't go from 0 to 100 from day one after kickoff. So I don't think you have to lean in with that kind of apprehensive anticipation. And we've worked with clients that's been through their busiest season, that's going through a little bit of a slower season, but we have a wide range of experience on what is the right size fit to still deliver the value in the timeline that you're looking for.
So in light of kind of all this reshuffling, it sounds like of different business priorities, a lot of that also involves kind of how work is done. I mean, in terms of a company coming to you saying, okay, we're looking to do the ERP project, that's also got to be challenging for an implementer like Sikich to do an implementation. I mean, is there like some virtual option? Is there some on-site stuff that still needs to happen?
So a lot of our clients, you can't manufacture from home. You can't ship product from home, at least for the larger distributors and so on. So we have both. We have teams that still do travel because we have certain clients that's never had a work from home policy. Of course, they have all the CDC recommendations in place, mask wearing, the social distancing, but they can't afford to shut down, or supply chain, certain components of a supply chain will shut down. There's other parts, because we have experience well before the pandemic, we started evaluating, and this was years before even the pandemic began, of how do we augment with technology, sometimes the constraints of the ongoing weekly travel. Because if you don't have experience, and I think all of us have gained that exposure, if you don't have experience working in a virtual environment, there's a lot of things, unfortunately, like my phone ringing, or not having the proper agenda, not setting the right expectations. It seems convenient and easy to get in front of a laptop roughly and have some of the same conversations, but you have to be very careful about how these are structured, because it can be so structured to a point where, yes, you can cover all your bases. It seems like you're super organized and going through your agenda. There's a lot of value in the, oh, by the way, conversations that happen in the hallway, that happen at the water cooler, some of which are very key requirements. But again, if you only take this in a very transactional approach, you go through all your very, I would say, binary questions of yes or no, and it's not wide enough of a discussion, you can miss some very key requirements. And so I think that's where we have a lot of strength, because we were traveling, good, bad, or ugly. We were traveling because our clients needed that support. Early in the pandemic, we had been preparing, not necessarily for this type of disruption, but how can we amplify and augment our services? And so we've seen some, how missteps and how to adjust for those. And I think we can coach clients through those, because a lot of people, this is their first go around of how do you still keep things moving along and not have these start and stop type of instances.
So you mentioned something about, just kind of like a lot of, oh, by the ways, and all these other different points of really communication.
Right.
And how is change management then different from a communication plan?
So I think sometimes these just get, I would say, commingled, and essentially what happens is it dilutes the intention. A change management plan, to me, is a concurrent work stream. It's actually not one or the other. It's both. They're occurring at the same time, but they have to have a distinct framework and objective and cadence for them to both be effective, and they have to be measured and monitored. So as you're structuring your project team, as you're getting your champions together, some subject matter experts, your executive sponsors, we have to talk through. And this isn't so everybody has a chair to seat, and as far as the core project team, but it is so important to have a reinforcement and supportive role from the executive and management team. They have to play a part in change management. They have to be also a part of the communication plan. And I think they can reinforce each other, but what you want to be very careful of is just kind of dropping a couple of dots in a communication plan, sending things out via email, briefly talking about it over a status report, and assuming that user adoption is just going to naturally occur.
Let's move on to some other questions here, because in ERP change management, there's one word in there that scares a lot of people. And the word is change. So what types of resistance to change will you see in an ERP implementation?
I would say if you had to classify it, you'll see more passive resistance than outright rebellion per se. But you have to just take a step back and look at things. Why are people reacting in certain ways? And I think this is where empathy becomes So there's experience, because if with more experience, you don't have as many blind spots. So you can kind of anticipate and recognize. And strangely enough, no matter the industry, I would say that the contortions of the face, the reactions, sometimes the statements made, you'll see these same things over and over and over again. And it's not so much that people are stereotypical, but there are patterns that you can recognize whenever change potentially is moving at a faster pace than what people feel like they're capable of. There's also the change reaction, if you will, or pushback of when we're not communicating in advance what's happening. And so people are jumping to the wrong conclusions, because there used to be, usually you have, very key leaders in an ERP implementation in a kind of enterprise project. And so what they're used to is being in a leadership position, leading from the front, always thinking ahead, proactively communicating. However, if you're not coaching them along, and I use that term lightly, meaning their experience, they're going to know their business better than we will to the detail. We have great industry experience. You have to anticipate, how can we think ahead, coach them along, give them ideas, and tell them in advance, here's what's going to happen this week, next week, and the following 6 weeks. So they have comfort in where things are going, and they can synthesize this into a message they feel comfortable in communicating with their employees. And it comes across more genuine than a cut and paste, if you will, from some manual or book on what corporate change management, the perception looks like.
It sounds a lot like setting expectations up front is pretty key to that then. So how do you go about that? What are the best ways to do that with stakeholders, with employees about these ERP projects?
And the simplest way to respond to that, and it sounds, probably oversimplifying it, you have to say the same things over and over again in different ways. This is not a one and done type of evolution. And people don't want to necessarily feel like qualitative KPIs, as if, are you going through certain words to check in the box? Does it feel mechanical or is it real? And you have to, it's not only just setting the expectations, it's reinforcing them, and it's celebrating the wins, right? And everybody has to have, it's not so much it's stay in your lane type of approach, but everybody has to have a force multiplier, if you will, type of role, because there's one goal. There are multiple objectives, but there's one goal: go live, to increase the business's efficiency. There's all kind of things, but everybody should be focused towards a primary set of goals, although there may be secondary objectives in each work stream. And so again, you have to not only set expectations, you have to reinforce expectations, you have to champion the wins. And this has to be constant and throughout. It can't go from cheerleader to, doldrum and disaster reaction. It has to be consistent. And whenever there's, say, for example, some issues that may arise, and there's always going to be something that we'll have to tackle, we have to talk about it, how we're going to deal with it internally. We've had, unfortunately, sometimes in the heat of the moment, and there'll be some types of emotional reactions, sometimes leaders doing that in front of some of the subject matter experts or end users. That message runs pretty quickly throughout the organization that, it looks like we're at ends with each other. We're going in different directions. And it sounds a little bit trivial, but you always have to understand not only what's being communicated, how is it being received, do, intermittent surveys and informal feedback, and you have to constantly check that temperature. So yes, it is setting reasonable expectations with all those subset, if you will, reinforcement types of approaches.
Earlier in the discussion, you mentioned about, the business owner knowing their business right down to the last detail. There's got to be other employees that, when you work on an ERP project, know those granular details as well. How do you go about choosing those people in the company that kind of need to sit at the table, that are influencing decisions, that are influencing kind of the direction of how these tools are being used?
So we have a core recommendation from champions to subject matter experts, to a steering committee, to the core project team by workstream lead. we have those brief descriptions. We talk through those. Here's what your team should look like. And then there's always going to be the nuances. Sometimes it's not necessarily going to be one individual per each, if you will, designation. Sometimes people are going to wear multiple hats. What we'll have to do at that point is analyze, are they going to be overwhelmed? Because, quite often they're not necessarily going to have new, additional hires augmenting their daytime job responsibilities. So we want to make sure that people aren't getting overwhelmed, also wearing the multiple hats of what may come through with an ERP implementation. So we work with them on what is the right size, if you will, chew to tackle this 800-pound gorilla and to make it consistent and to prevent as minimal change. It's kind of funny, we're talking about change management to a certain degree, but once the project begins, we want to minimize as much change that's additive to already a big change initiative.
So you mentioned making change. This is, change, ERP change management, but there also should, discussion about policies, new policies for the business as a whole. Is it, a good time? Is it, advisable to do that during an ERP project, or is that something maybe, we can wait?
So there's, so the software was optimized and created with a certain level of efficiency and an expectation, and I know this sounds long-winded, of a transactional and business workflow. Sometimes that necessarily won't completely align with a current existing business practice. So my response to that is there has to be some level of policy change to support. Sometimes there are going to be business processes that are going to be re-engineered or slightly modified. What we do have to caution our clients about is that they see all the potential and they see all of the what could be new efficiencies or sometimes new reports or a new enhancement from Power BI, and they are, I won't say it's like cats and lasers, but they're so energized. But what could be, we lose focus on what has to be in the sense of stabilization. What I would call operational efficiency and stabilization should be your primary goal first, and then after you've gone live with the initial core, and the initial core can be a very in-depth and breadth, if you will, implementation, but you're trying to manage how much rework, policy change, different type of business flows. You want to be careful of how much change you're injecting into the business all at once, because you don't want that to impact the customers that you serve. So the answer is yes, you have to implement certain new policies, and it should be done with caution and more of a surgeon approach than a sledgehammer using ERP to be the lead bull, if you will.
Well, fantastic, Robert. I'm out of questions for you today, but thanks for getting our memo about the blue shirts and joining us today. And if you want to know anything more about ERP change management, people, they can reach out to you. Robert, they can reach out to you via LinkedIn, and they can also look down below here. Go to sikich.com to learn more about some of the offerings that we do have. And if there's anything else you want to leave us with, we'll give you the floor here before we sign out.
I think maybe it's because I'm a glass half full that change is an opportunity. Change can be fun and exciting, and it's all how you position it. So setting the expectations is having a positive mental attitude, and you'll be surprised at how that amplifies and rubs off on people. And then they start looking at ways to add value to the organization, and it can become a real exciting thing than just, here we go with another ERP implementation.
Oh, fantastic. And that's all we have for today. Thank you all for joining, and we will catch you next Tuesday for another Sikich Live, as well as the following Thursday. So everybody have a great week, and we'll see you later.